So, I'd like to introduce Bill Lapcevic, VP of Customer Happiness, formerly the head BD guy here at New Relic, and he's going to talk about MacGyvering your way to a partnership. Bill.
Freebird. I'm going to risk putting red wine by the laptop. Why not? It's only a company laptop. First of all, thank you for coming. This is so cool to have a space like this to host events for business development. I've been in business development for a long, long time, and I'm just moving into a different role, as Nathan mentioned. But I was the founding business development person here, built up a bunch of partnerships, and it really drove a lot of activity for our company, especially early on. It drove a lot of awareness and credibility. Now it's driving a lot of revenue for the company, which kind of is the point of business development ultimately, right? And that's why we're going to talk about how to MacGyver your way to $1 million partnership. Who knows who MacGyver is? All right, there are some of you who don't. Be prepared. He's the coolest guy of all time. Okay? And you just have to ride it with me. Okay? Because let me see if this works. Because the subtitle to this is "And Other Things I've Learned About Business Development Thanks to My Rabid Sitcom Habit." So we're not just going to talk about MacGyver, although he's going to make a big appearance in the presentation. We're going to talk about a couple of other sitcoms along the way. Okay, so here's who I am. I started that. I've been at New Relic since February of 2008. And for those of you playing at home, that's 6.5 years. We weren't very big 6.5 years ago. We didn't have this 6.5 years ago. In fact, we had a room that was probably about as big as this stage, and we had a desk here, and a desk here, and a desk here, and a love seat right here. And the trick was that you had to come in before the fourth person came in, or you didn't get a desk. And I will revise that. You had to come in before the third person came in, because Lou, the CEO, always got a desk. Right? You didn't want to sit with your laptop on the love seat all day long. And that's really important for you to know, because when we started the partnerships program here at New Relic, we had nothing. We didn't even have a product yet. Right? We had an alpha product that we started showing a company called Engine Yard. And they got fascinated by it. And we leveraged that into, well, now I think we have something like 120 different partners, 60 of which are tightly integrated with our application performance management tool. They build it into their platforms. They provide it to their customers. They use it internally. They love the product, if I do say so myself. And we're going to talk about a couple of stories about these partners. And does anybody recognize the one that I'm standing in front of? This is really hard when the table is right in front of the screen. Anybody recognize this? Yeah, Heroku, right. Heroku was our second partnership. We're going to talk about how that happened. I'm going to give you a couple of hints as to, or tips and tricks as to how we created a partnership pretty much out of nothing. And then Rackspace, everyone know Rackspace? Yeah. Right? Rackspace is a cool partner, man. I love those guys. First of all, they have a slide in their office. Second of all, that office is an old shopping mall in San Antonio. And so if you ever go there, go down the slide. It's really, really fun. Video yourself going down the slide. If I had had time, I would have uncovered the video of me going down the slide, videoing while I'm going down the slide. And it would have been cool to show you. And then Microsoft. Everyone knows Microsoft. Microsoft has Microsoft Azure, which is the second largest public cloud in the known universe. It pales in comparison to AWS, which I could have talked about, but Microsoft's a slightly more interesting story.
There he is.
There's MacGyver. Note the Ray-Bans. Note the missile on his shoulder. Right? Note the members-only leather jacket. I tried to find one for tonight, but say la vie. Anyway, anybody know what MacGyver is known for?
Ballpoint pens.
Ballpoint pens. Good. Anybody else?
Bootstrapping his way out of a situation.
Aha! Well done. You see how that relates to ballpoint pens? Probably not. MacGyver would use chewing gum. He'd use rocks. He'd use pretty much anything he happened to have at hand. And he'd fashion some kind of missile, satellite system, or whatever to get himself out of the situation using common household items. It was so cool. There was a whole series about this, season after season. And so, to start, I'd like to present to you, just for some context, the 4 best MacGyvers ever. And it's hard to see, because VCRs don't have very good resolution. You all know what a VCR is? You're not that young? Okay. This is a pipe in the basement where MacGyver was locked. And MacGyver ended up using sticks, rocks, rags, a pipe, and a boiler to create a missile to blow through the concrete wall and escape the basement. So cool. You can't see really well, but that's MacGyver, and that's a fire extinguisher bomb. So cool. Right? This was in Jack of Lies, Season 2, Episode 6. He used a fire extinguisher. He used metal hooks, tape, and a bungee cord. What do you think he did with that? This is so cool. He taped the metal hooks to the fire extinguisher and the bungee cord. He did something with that. And he threw it out of a plane at the jeeps that were chasing the plane as it was trying to take off. And the jeep ran over the fire extinguisher, embedding the hooks into the fire extinguisher, causing it to explode, knocking the jeep over, and saving the day. Cool. An egg white radiator. What do you do when all you have is an egg and your radiator springs a leak? Well, you use the water and you boil the egg and drop it into the radiator, and as it cooks, it seals the leak. So cool. And then the last one, this is my personal favorite, and kind of the point, the electric gum wrapper. Everybody knows MacGyver can use chewing gum for just about everything, but he can use the wrapper too. What he did was, he needed to create an electrical circuit, so he wrapped the blown fuse in the foil wrapper from a piece of chewing gum to create the electricity he needed to get out of the situation, right? And that's really important that you know. And plus the name was Hellfire, so that's cool. All right, so episode 1, Heroku. The setup. So I'm going to do this each time, right? I'm going to set up the situation. I'm going to take you through what happened, and hopefully you'll get something out of it. There we go. So New Relic had just launched a Ruby conference in Portland in June of 2008. We just launched our product. It turns out that Heroku had also just launched their product, and we're in the booth next to us. And we went over and saw each other's demos, and we're like, oh, that's really interesting. That's kind of cool. Well, it turns out that Heroku and EngineYard, who I mentioned we were partnered with first, right? At the very beginning, that's how we got started. EngineYard gave us to all their customers, and we quickly had 400 users of our product, surpassing the existing app performance management tool that was in the Ruby space by about 10 times the customers, creating the awareness and the word of mouth that propelled the company. Anyway, Heroku and EngineYard were battling for the hearts and minds of Ruby developers. Heroku had this awesome platform as a service that they were trying to get people to develop their apps on. And EngineYard had an awesome infrastructure where they wanted you to come and put Ruby apps and host them on EngineYard, which actually is what we ended up doing. So we knew we had a valuable addition to their portfolio, because who doesn't need application performance monitoring, right? Everybody needs it. Why? Especially if you're a platform provider or an infrastructure provider. What's the first thing that happens when the application stops working? Does the developer think it's their code?
No.
No. Who does the developer think is the problem? It's the infrastructure provider. It's got to be, because my code is great, it's flawless, especially, and I hope not too many of you are Ruby developers. If you're in a BD thing, you're probably not a developer. Ruby developers are artists. They believe in their code, it's beautiful. It's not their code that's the problem, right? Well, maybe it is and maybe it isn't, but you have to have visibility into the infrastructure and into the app to determine whether it's the code or not, right? We stopped the finger pointing. That was our value proposition to EngineYard and why they wanted to give us to their customers. Okay, so I set this up for you so you can figure out what this picture is. We have Engine Yard and we have Heroku, bitter rivals. I have an awesome tool that could help both of them. What's going on in this picture? It's your first MacGyver of the night. Arms trading. How do you get Heroku to partner with you? You tell them that Engine Yard is partnering with you. How do you get Engine Yard to partner with you? You have the specter of Heroku potentially building you into their system. Right? Both wanted to be first. Engine Yard actually was. But because Engine Yard was already working with us, Heroku was desperate to add us because they had to have parity. Right? We were arms trading. Right? This is an important early stage startup BD tip. Right? Find two competitive partners and arms trade. Make sure they realize that one of them is going to get an advantage. This came in really handy when negotiating the contract with Heroku. Ultimately, we said, fine, if you don't want the price we're going to give you, we're not going to do the deal. And they came back and said, no, we have to do it. Right? So that led to the start of the partnership. Important MacGyver tip. It's almost as good as the chewing gum fuse. Okay, second MacGyver tip is integrate. In order to develop a partnership over a long period of time, especially when you're small, individual sales and handheld implementation as a software company is a disaster area, right? If you have to take each of Heroku's customers and hand walk them through installation, purchase, and implementation of the product, configuration of the product, it's going to take you forever. Forever. Heroku had 20,000 customers. They have 50,000 active customers or more now. We can't possibly touch all those customers. So how did we do it? We built integration. Right? We were the first add-on in the Heroku add-on catalog. Right? We built these APIs that allowed us to create a button in Heroku that you pressed, it installed our agent, and it purchased the product from us. Pretty cool. It wasn't as easy as it sounds. And maybe that doesn't sound that easy, unless you're the Ruby developer I talked about earlier. The hard part was convincing our company, who was busy building features for the core product to sell direct, that they should stop what they were doing and build all these APIs for partnerships. That was a challenge, right? Stealing resources from the mainline engineering feature development is an impossible task. But you gotta do it early on. Because what finally convinced our engineering department was, we convinced them that many, many other platforms as a service would want to use these same APIs to do the Heroku-like deal. Back to arms trading, yeah? We got the resources from engineering, we pair programmed. A couple weeks later, we had the fledgling APIs, and we took it and we used those same APIs at 60 other partners over the next 4 or 5 years. And that created the infrastructure on which partnerships are formed, generating leads, generating revenue for New Relic. And I'm not sure if this is in one of my slides, but if it is, it's your preview. We do about 15% of the lead generation for New Relic, and about 20% of the revenue of the company per year is generated through those leads. And so it's a pretty significant amount of revenue. That poor guy, I hope he makes it. That was my feeling too, not long ago. So these partnerships sometimes last a long time. Don't think that the first deal that you put in place is going to be the way that the partnership works in 4, 5, 6 years. Don't worry too much about carving out the perfect deal. Carve out the one that's a win for both companies, because you shouldn't be afraid to change the game, right? Here's what we did recently with Heroku. We took a look at the numbers, we took a look at the adoption, and we were probably getting about 10% of their users were paying customers, maybe a little less than that. We said, let's drop the price. What would happen if we dropped the price, like dramatically, like by 70%, of a price that was already a quarter of the price that we normally would charge a direct customer? Now, why would we do that? Well, it's supply and demand, right? If we have a lower price, more people can afford it, the demand spreads out, and we have more demand for the product. Well, and in fact, that's exactly what happened. We renegotiated the price point, which was to Heroku's benefit, because our price point actually scaled linearly, and theirs didn't. And so there was an inflection point where our price became far more expensive than running on Heroku. That actually was bad for them, because they needed everybody to run our product to help support those customers. So today, what's going on with the Heroku relationship? Well, number one, it's well over $1 million ARR now. That's pretty cool. Hey, it took 6 years. I didn't say this would be like $1 million partnership instantly, but it's $1 million partnership over time. And those are very rare. Monetization of partnerships is very rare in general. To get to $1 million is kind of a magic number to me. Number two, since we made that game changer price change, revenue's up 20% in 6 months and growing. It's so cool. It's like MacGyver-esque. There's massive usage. This is an important point. It's not a MacGyver, but it's an important point for you. And you know this. Partnerships provide massive leverage for you. It's like the gravitational slingshot of a satellite around Jupiter to get to the outer reaches of the solar system, right? You can't get there on your own. You've got to use a bigger body and slingshot yourself around. Heroku's a bigger body because they have 50,000 plus customers for us. They're all small, but they're all willing to pay, or many of them are. And then we were tightly integrated. Important learning. I think at the beginning, tightly integrated partnerships are important because it creates an essentially a no-touch channel for you if you do it right. And you don't have a lot of salespeople. You don't have a lot of time. You're worried about building other things. You're not necessarily worried about building out a 150-person sales force to handle the entire environment. Let's see if I have any more learnings here. Yeah. And the partnership API infrastructure was used by now 60-plus partners that New Relic has put together. It became sort of a standard for implementing APM tools across many, 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 many partners. Any questions on that? Good, because we've got episode 2, backspace. Now, at the beginning I said sitcoms, so we're gonna keep giving you MacGyvers, but we're gonna switch sitcoms. That's okay with everyone. Well, it's gonna be okay because it's gonna happen. But let me set things up first. So Rackspace, in 2009 we started talking to Rackspace. At that time, we were pretty much, thanks to our Heroku and engineered partnerships, dominating the Ruby market in terms of awareness, credibility, number of customers, revenue, you name it, right? And we had decided that the Ruby market wasn't going to grow fast enough for us long term. We would add Java agents, .NET agents, and then over time add Python and PHP, and Node didn't exist then really, so we didn't know at the time, but a multi-platform strategy. But at the time, we just had Ruby. Rackspace then became one of our top 3 targets because we knew we were going to have multiple platforms, and we knew they supported all these different languages, and they had 150,000 customers. Pretty good, even if we only got 10% of those. Even if we only got 5% of those, that's still 7,500 customers, which we've now eclipsed, but it would have taken us an awful long time to eclipse that. Amazon and Microsoft obviously were the other 2 massive public cloud infrastructures that we wanted to get access to their customers. But they were way bigger than us, right? At that time, I don't know what our market cap would have been had we been a public company, $10, $20. I don't know, it was really small, right? We were probably in 2009, 30 people. And Rackspace is a $665 million company at that time, growing. They're now well over $1 billion, couple $1 billion market cap. Right? How do you approach that? How do you deal with a massive, complicated company with lots of departments, lots of people, lots of locations? Right? They're very complicated and big. You take a tip from Larry David. Who knows Larry David? Yeah. Larry David, the creator of Seinfeld. Seinfeld? Seinfeld. I have a guy named Scheinfeld who works for me and I get it confused all the time. If you've ever watched Curb Your Enthusiasm, Curb Your Enthusiasm is one of my favorite shows because Larry David always gets gets himself into these socially awkward situations where he could just stop talking and be fine, but he always says one more thing that just causes all hell to break loose, right? And it's not that I'm going to talk about. What I want to talk about is how Curb Your Enthusiasm seasons are structured. They're structured with a story arc, which is MacGyver number 4. Okay? The story arc. This is important when you're dealing with a massive partner who's way bigger than you, and you have to convince them that they should be working with you. Have you ever played whack-a-mole? You know whack-a-mole? Mm-hmm. You're wondering, why is he talking about whack-a-mole? With whack-a-mole, you take the mallet and you slam the mole down, and another one pops up somewhere else. Slam another one down, another one pops up somewhere else. Oh my God, how do you get them all down at once? You really can't. Right? This is your problem when working with a big organization. You go to work with the marketing department. The product department's working with somebody else. You go to work with the product department. The sales department likes someone else. You go to work with the sales department. The executives are thinking something else, right? So what do? You've got to find a way to tie all of those departments together in your strategy. You create a story arc where you understand their story arc. Every big company, well, even New Relic has a story arc, a direction that the company is going. For Larry David in season 4, he had 2 pieces of his story arc. The story arc crossed the entire season, right? Bear with me on this. I didn't make these up. These are actually true. Larry was supposed to star in a Mel Brooks production of The Producers on Broadway. And Larry was allowed to commit adultery one time. His wife let him. On their 10th wedding anniversary. Well, you can imagine how that turned out, right? Not well. None of it ever turns out well for him. But as you can see, there are episodes, right? So in Mel's offer, it drives the story arc because that's the first time that you find out that Mel Brooks is offering Larry David the star in The Producers on Broadway, right? In The Weatherman drives the story arc, and Larry gets upset about a bunch of things and causes all sorts of problems for the production of The Producers. He gets upset because there's the wrong forecast, it gets wet, and it's a real problem. In The Five Wood, this is one of my favorite episodes. I just threw this in there. It's part of the season. I don't see how it drives the story arc forward, but it's worth it. Larry is going to get kicked out of a country club, and ultimately he moves all his stuff and thinks somebody stole his 5-wood, and then goes to a funeral and there's the 5-wood in the casket, and he actually reaches into the casket and takes the 5-wood out. Talk about socially inept, right? The carpool lane, sort of along the line of the last one, he picks up a prostitute, specifically so he can use the carpool lane to get to Dodger Stadium. Awesome. Such a great show. In The Survivor, this is when he notices that his dry cleaner, who is a good-looking, acidic Jewish woman, Larry David is Jewish, is making the moves on him, and he realizes that this is his chance to fulfill this. And then in opening night, the show is on, and just before Larry David goes on, his wife reminds him that he has until midnight that night, his wedding anniversary, to make good on his promise. And he goes out and he totally forgets all his lines. It's a complete disaster area, right? And it's been building this entire time, right? The story arc, where each episode drives the story arc forward. So what's the story arc of Rackspace? I promise you there's no more adultery in my presentation. Fanatical support and drive to cloud, right? They've been an infrastructure provider. They're trying to create a DevOps community. They're trying to leverage the fact that they have infrastructure and a public cloud infrastructure, combine the two into the best hybrid cloud by providing the top level of support in the industry. They're not as big as Microsoft, they're not as big as Amazon, they don't have the resources of those companies, but what they do is they have an organization that culturally is designed to drive fanatical support. Anything that customer needs, they will get from Rackspace. Any time of night. Well, for a price. So, here are the episodes in this big, complex company. Sales, field technical, marketing, product, services, executives, internal use, and there are probably a quarter of a dozen, 4 or 5 others, right? So what's your job? Your job is to figure out how each of these departments is driving their company's story arc forward, and then figure out which one you have the best value proposition to, and go after them one at a time until you've covered the whole thing. So here's how New Relic did it. Number one, we noticed that a couple developers had already downloaded self-service, downloaded our product, and were using it. So we went, we talked to them, we learned a bunch of people, we learned a bunch of things about why they thought it was important, how it helped them with their day-to-day job. We did a lot of assessing how these guys drove their story arc forward and how that probably affected everybody else in the company. Then we went to the field technical teams, not the sales people, at least not for our product. We have a very technical product, application performance management, bytecode instrumentation, method calls, transaction traces, it's very technical. Who understands the technical product? The field technical people. These are the people that are stuck at a customer account on Saturday morning after having been there all day Friday because the application doesn't work. So we went there and said, not we can help your customer, but we can help you, Mr. Field Technical Person, get home on Friday night because we can solve your problem faster. Well, that caused adoption, right? People started taking us up on our offer to use our tool for free in their accounts, right? We had adoption, kind of rolled with that. We would feed it back to marketing and the execs. The execs, who we then meet with, saying, well, I'm going to check with my field and make sure that they like your product. And they do, and of course they like the product because the field technical guys are using it. The field technical guys then call us up and say, oh my God, the CEO of the company just called me and asked if I liked you, and I got to tell him that I was already using you and I was wildly successful. Positive reinforcement. So he told the exec that, the exec then pushes down, and we get this nice flywheel of a virtuous flywheel spinning around, right? That provides the momentum, because once a flywheel starts, it's really, really hard to stop. So what we did, and then by the way, we went to these other groups too, but for the sake of time. So we learned the story arc, we figured out what that was, we figured out how each group within the story arc works. And now my BD team has a plan for how they approach sales, for how they approach field technical, for how they approach marketing. They have a plan, they have a strategy, they have tactics, right? And actually, pro tip, getting that field and getting broad support in the field is really important. We did something after this got rolling called the Partner Response Center. And the Partner Response Center are, for us, it's 2 people who are purpose-built for building relationships and mapping out the participants in the field at our partners. Their job is awareness, their job is customer service, their job is to be the single point of contact for anything that happens in the field. If they need resources, if the field person needs training, if they need product, if they need an exec, whatever they need, they call that and we get it for them. We become easier to do business with than their own company. And as you all know, people buy and people work with people that they trust and like, right? So that's another off the presentation MacGyver for you. So go after the worker bees. Go after the field technical people. Go after the people that have the problem. The execs don't have the problem. Their people have the problem. The exec's problem is that their people have a problem, right? Go after the worker bees. That's MacGyver number 5. Anyone know who that is? Yeah, Karl Marx. Who thought Karl Marx would be in this presentation? Seriously, nobody. Why is he in here? Well, it will be the workers with their courage, resolution, and self-sacrifice who would be chiefly responsible for achieving victory. Turns out it's true in partnerships too. Find the workers, find the people who are on the front lines, and help them, and they will sponsor you all the way to the top. Right? Hello. So today Rackspace generates nearly $3 million for New Relic a year as both a distribution channel and from their internal use of our product. Rackspace support uses New Relic in almost every account. At least they recommend us in every account. When you're a Rackspace customer and you call and say, my app sucks and it's your fault, they say, you need to install New Relic. Otherwise, we really can't see what's going on in your app to tell you if you're right or not. Pretty cool. And it's the deepest relationship that we've built to date here at this company. Episode 3, Microsoft. This one is pretty fast. Setup, July 2012, New Relic has a very basic low-level relationship. We're talking to some people, we're talking to the SCOM group, we're talking to the Azure group, we're kind of at the product manager level. We know we need to elevate. Microsoft is enormous and complex. More enormous and complex than Rackspace. They're a massive company to try and navigate. There's so many divisions. There's internal competition to what we're doing. So what do you do in that case? You have to go high when there's internal competition. You have to get above the noise to somebody who recognizes the difference between what they have and what you can provide. And Microsoft Azure was starting at that time to really gain traction in the market. We had actually been working with them in 2010 and 2011, but I can tell you that at that time, Azure was unusable. We saw one professional services guy got his Azure bill for his blog. It was 96 pages long. It was itemized, 96 pages, every server, every hour. Only it wasn't in order. It was just every server, every hour in random order. It was a disaster area. It's way better now. In fact, it's awesome. I use it for my blog. And like I said, it was a competitive situation. They had a System Center Operations Manager, which had acquired a company that did Java Application Performance Management. They kept calling us in and bringing all their VPs of engineering and asking us to tell us all the secrets. And you just knew that it was because they were trying to build a SaaS product that did what we do. So we had to be very careful about that. So the strategy was pitch high and pitch big. Go in and pitch every Azure company gets New Relic for free, and Microsoft pays us $500 million. Cool. We didn't get laughed out of the office for that. Last sitcom, How I Met Your Mother. Anyone watch that? Yeah. Oh, God. Hardly anybody. You guys are all working too much. How I Met Your Mother is awesome. I won't go into the premise, but there's this guy. Anyone know who that is? Yeah, it's Doogie Howser. That's a good answer. It's Barney. Yeah, right? So here's your MacGyver. Always have a guy. Now one of the guys who works for me said, oh, you have to be really careful about saying the word guy, because there are females in the audience. But there's a real reason that I called it a guy. It's because Barney has a guy named Guy. And hopefully you can hear this. Oops. Hello, that's not Guy. Hang on. Back. Go back. Let's see how I do this. Oh yeah, there.
All my guys are here. Guys? Yeah, you know how I got a guy for everything? Well, they're all in New York. What's a guy? Shoot guy, like take a guy, like a guy, and if I don't have guys or something, like a guy, give me a guy. And then his name is Guy.
Yeah, have a guy. Oops, shouldn't have done that. Sorry about that. I'm not a PowerPoint expert. And that was supposed to be the last build, not the first. So you're just going to have to pretend that Mike is not there. So these are the two guys we wanted to get to. Who knows what this guy's name is? Satya. Yeah. At the time, he was not the CEO. At the time, he was the head of all cloud for Microsoft, which is probably why he's CEO now. And who knows who that guy is? Guys, it's like pulling teeth. Scott Guthrie. Right, Scott Guthrie. So Scott Guthrie was the head of all engineering for Azure. We wanted those two guys to know who we were and kind of bless us and help us. So we wanted to get to them with our CEO, Lou, who always makes a cameo appearance in my presentations. And we needed a way. We didn't know either one, but we have an investor from Allen & Company named Mike Christensen. And Allen & Company is sort of on the finance side of things. They're later stage investors in this case, but he was our guy, right? He was our guy. He knew Satya. In fact, it turns out he met with him regularly. And by regular, I meant like every 6 months or so. Well, Mike introduced Lou to Satya at an Allen & Company conference. There was our entry. Lou pitched the idea, we came back, we put the presentation together, we went in and got to meet with Satya and with Scott. So I'm sitting there with our CEO and Satya, who's now the CEO of Microsoft. I think that's so cool because when Bill Gates was the CEO of Microsoft and I was little, he was like so far away from me that I never thought I would ever meet him. But I met the CEO. That's really cool. Always have a guy. You all have contacts. You probably have advisors or investors or attorneys or friends or something who know people who know people. BD is all about this network effect, right? Use those people to get to the people you need to meet to be successful. Right? Yeah, Mike was our guy. And guess what? LinkedIn. Who uses LinkedIn? Anyone from LinkedIn here? I said this at a talk a couple weeks ago. I said, use LinkedIn, and the guy next to me, turns out he was the VP of Business Development for LinkedIn. I didn't know at the time. Right? This LinkedIn is your pack of chewing gum, right? To make the connection, to get the electricity flowing, right? You can be MacGyver if you use LinkedIn. Okay, so today, where's the Microsoft relationship today? It's $1 million plus ARR and growing. Right? Again, tightly integrated. We are built into their gallery. We are built into their store. You can buy us through them. You can buy us through us. It doesn't matter how you want to buy us, you can buy us. And really important. That integration is really important. And they're number one. I think we're the number one add-on. If not, we're the number two. And we've got a multi-division, multi-product relationship. They're mobile people like us. We've got internal use in their CRM division, a couple other places. We're broadening our reach. We're learning the story arc. We're stealing from the Rackspace episode 2. Who remembers? I know it's hard to recognize him without the sunglasses. That's MacGyver. He says, let me explain. No, there is no time. Let me sum up. So we're going to have the lessons learned here today. MacGyver number 1, arms trading. Play them off each other, right? Really effective strategy. MacGyver number 2, integrate now, but do it so that it standardizes for the future and that you can leverage that integration to have a better value proposition for all your other partners. Don't just do custom integrations for everybody. Your engineering department will hate you if you do that. MacGyver number 3, don't be afraid to change the game. Worked for us with Heroku, it's worked with us with other partners. Don't be afraid. A partnership as it's structured now is not necessarily what it's going to be 6 months, a year, 5 years from now. MacGyver number 4, that story arc, really important with big partners. Gotta have it. Turns out it's important with small partners, but it's easy because you can get everybody in the same room at the same time. You're still doing the same thing, but they're all there. And MacGyver number 5, always have a guy, but not always named Guy. And a quote from MacGyver, a paperclip is a wondrous thing. More times than I can remember, one of these has gotten me out of a tight spot. And it turns out, Google is a wonderful thing too. And I actually found out that you can buy a MacGyver paperclip. I do not have one, although I would like one for Christmas. And last, in closing, I want you to remember this, and this is really important. Remember, keep trying because they don't show you the times MacGyver doesn't make it out alive. The episodes are all about the successes. You're going to have failures. You're going to have a lot of failures. Not always will this work, but it won't work unless you use some of these tactics. And when it does work, it'll work brilliantly. So I hope you learned something. Thank you very much. Enjoy the space. Enjoy the rest of the talks. Have a good night.
Hey Bill, I'm Ryan. Thanks for your talk, man. Quick question. The Heroku versus Engineer case, did you guys consider like an exclusivity thing? Like, because they'll come to you, my experience is they'll be like, we're going to either build this or buy this.
Yep.
We're not going to like work with you guys because you're too small. So how did you guys get around that? And
So contracts are confidential, right? I don't share what the contract terms are for one partner with the other. It turns out we did go into an exclusive arrangement with Engineer for 1 year. Now, why would I do that? Because personally, I hate exclusivity. I think that it's a bad thing for your company. You should never go into exclusivity, except in one very specific case. And that is when you're first starting up and you have 3 people in your company and you have an opportunity to get 400 active users. You go into exclusivity because, frankly, for that year, it's almost impossible to handle 2 partnerships anyway. So you've already given, if you're going to a deep partnership relationship, you've already given de facto exclusivity. So we did. We said you can be exclusive. Now, that doesn't mean you can't negotiate during the exclusivity period, which is what we did with Heroku. We pitched them, we played them off of each other, we provided massive value, we trialed it, we did all of those things, and about 5 days after the exclusivity expired, we launched with Heroku. So we prepped during the exclusivity period. But at the beginning, as a very small startup, you probably won't be able to handle more than one deeply integrated partnership at a time anyway. So it's a little less bad to look at exclusivity in that case. Good question. Other questions?
One more.
Over here. And if the question is, where's the rest of the beer? I don't know. Sorry.
We're getting some more.
JD Lassica with Crucible. You mentioned leveraging LinkedIn, which is a great strategy for B2B companies, but for a B2C startup, how do you see startups being able to use LinkedIn, since very few people that I know of use LinkedIn other than in business context?
Well, sure, but I'm also talking about partnerships, right? So even B2C companies have B2B partnerships for a variety of purposes. For awareness, for market share, distribution, whatever it is. And LinkedIn is going to be valuable in those cases. It's not a great tool for finding out all your customers. I mean, you should have that information about your customers. If you're not collecting contact information from all your customers, we didn't do that for a long time. We thought that developers didn't want to give us more than maybe an email. It turns out that if it's a valuable enough product, they'll do it, and then you'll have that contact information. I'm talking specifically with LinkedIn for partnering with other companies to find the right people, people you know who are associated with them. And if your network is big enough, you'll be able to find a lot more than that. There's another good question. Anything else? Oh, speak loudly.
Just shout it out.
John Garcia, quick question for you. It seems like you changed the type of partnerships you were going after over time.
Yeah.
How did you what was your strategy there?
I have a whole nother presentation on that topic because it's a really, really important one. It turns out that the type of partnership, at least in my opinion, the type of partnership that you enter into is entirely dependent on the stage of your company, right? So for us, and this is not the case with every company in this order, but for us, awareness and credibility were the first 2 driving forces when we were really small. We wanted enough people to know us that we would create a word-of-mouth network effect, so lots of people would come, and we would, honestly, we didn't have a marketing department. I was the marketing department when we were 3 people, and all I had was a website. I didn't know how to do SEO management and stuff. I mean, we have an amazing marketing department now that does billboards and probably follows you around on the internet, and you see our ads everywhere. But we didn't have that then. So the network effect of the partnership was really important, and credibility. We didn't want to get into a situation where everybody, look, APM, Application Performance Management, is kind of invasive. You're putting our code in your code, and that code is putting other things in your code so we can monitor stuff. Right? So when we entered a new market like Ruby that was not used to that type of mechanism, which, by the way, by that time in Java and .NET was sort of the de facto standard for how you did application performance monitoring. But Rubyists didn't understand that at the time, so we had to have credibility. We had to have the thought leaders of Ruby speaking highly of us so that people would understand. We then shifted to more of a revenue model, where revenue became more important and creating lead generation that turned into revenue, converted well, and ultimately we ended up at a model where now a lot of our partnership, and we certainly still do the distribution stuff, but we added on utility, which is all about extending the capabilities of our product through API sets that we developed to allow you to send data to us, to pull data out of us. We have a platform program where you can literally build plugins for our system. all of those things extend the reach of our product within an IT organization so we can cover more than we could ever develop ourselves. But that ultimately was a late stage thing, right? So you're absolutely right. Different stages, you got to think about what is important for your company at that moment in time and pick partnerships that will drive that behavior. And if you're lucky, some of them will continue through all the stages, right? Our Amazon relationship, our Rackspace relationship started out as awareness and credibility, moved quickly into revenue generating, and now also provides utility where we have plugins by Amazon for a lot of their technologies, Microsoft, Rackspace are all building plugins for our systems.
Really good question. So we got to keep an eye on the clock. A round of applause for Bill, please.
Thanks.